Welcome to Heart to Heart with Joyous J. I'm your host, Janice Pettigrew, affectionately known as Joyous Janice. This podcast is dedicated to providing encouragement and support as we travel together unearthing the powerful and awesome person within just waiting to emerge. Last week, I talked about my mom and how I had been missing her during my time of reflection. And of course, I shared with you some of the qualities and things that I inherited from her. Well, my dad is gone too, and I must admit, I was a daddy's girl. And so this week, what I'd very much like to do is share with you my dad. Now, Dad wasn't a perfect man, not by a long shot. And of course, he had his struggles. But I loved my dad. And if you're a dad, or if you happen to be blessed enough to have your dad around, then you have to admit that a lot of the choices you've made about men in your life can actually be attributed to the type of father that was in your life, or lack thereof. Therefore, it's important to recognize it's just not important to have a mom in your life. It's important to have your dad, because dads teach you things as well. I mean, I got hard work from my dad, and looking out for the younger person or the little guy. I got that from my dad. But I also learned what I didn't want by having the relationship I did with my dad. Now, like I said, I definitely was a daddy's girl. And between the five of us kids, I kind of took possession of my dad more. Like, he was my dad, and I just kind of loaned him to my sister and my brothers. But that was just my thing. But I remember there were qualities about my dad that subconsciously, the younger me chose men in my life that had some of those qualities. And being honest, those qualities were not good. And so I have to thank my dad for that, because even though I was in relationships that were not good because of those particular qualities, it did teach me and groom me to want more and to want better. You know, I can't fault my dad, because I have to go by what he learned and what he knew. Now, my dad was a country boy, barefoot in the country, milking the cows, working on a farm. Those are the things that my dad knew. And that there was a part of him that wanted more for his family than what he had. So that ambition to try to improve, I got that from my dad. And I got it from my mom as well. But we're talking about my dad this week. But there was also a part of my dad, because that's all that he knew. Once he brought us children, his whole family, to the city, it really didn't sit well with him. And so there was always a part of him that longed for what he knew. And as I became an adult, a more knowledgeable adult, I recognized that in him. And I saw his struggle, the wanting to provide for his family, but also wanting to have what he knew and not lose it. And I think that part of him is a part that I have in me, not wanting to lose a part of myself. I think that's part of the struggle I had in past marriages. Yes, I said past marriages. I've been married more than once, and I am blessed to have the one that I have now. And I'm sure there are days that he think about some of my qualities. He's not so sure he's blessed to have me around, but all the same, I fight with him sometimes because I don't want to lose me. Now, when I use the word fight, please don't get it wrong. We've never had a physical confrontation ever in our lives. We've had arguments, we've had disagreements, but they really didn't come a lot along until much later, because there was a part of me that did not like confrontation. And so it was a habit of mine to shy from confrontation. But deep within, there was a resentment in me that I wasn't speaking up for myself. And so as I began to recognize who Janice was, and Janice has her own opinions, and Janice did not want to get lost in someone else's idea of who Janice should be, that was a fight that I had with my husband, that I have still to this day sometimes. He always says that I don't talk. Well, I've never been much of a talker. Yeah, I know. Here I am. I'm sitting on a podcast and I'm sharing my heart with you. And I'm hoping as I share with you that you also will begin to use your journal to share of yourself. Even if nobody else has it, nobody else reads it, it could just be yours. Speaking of journal, by the way, while I have it on my mind, I want you to know that my Heart2Heart journal will be available on Amazon soon. And I hope you'll pick up one so that you have that personal journal that goes along with this podcast, and that you will begin to use it to go through the year and learn and see what it is about you that you have grown and what you've learned and what you aspire for. Anyway, back to my dad. Dad was such a hard worker. That was the most important thing to him. He worked hard. And I inherited that from him as well. I'm not one that liked to sit still. Not for very long anyway. And I think between mom and dad, I got a double dose of not wanting to just sit still. To let things just happen, and by osmosis things get better. They don't. You have to do some things as well. And so I've learned that, and I gained that knowledge from my dad. Now, there were qualities, as I said, that my dad had that were not positive. They weren't good. And my dad's no longer here. Suffice it to say that those qualities, that as they began to present themselves to me through men wanting the opportunity to be in my life, the older me learned to turn away. I learned that no, I did not want a man that raised his voice to me. I did not want a man that always felt like he needed to have a drink in his hand, or he couldn't control himself when he was inebriated. I needed someone who would always put me first, put family first. I didn't need to have a whole bunch of people in my life, but the main person in my life needed to honor me. And I got that from my dad. I learned that from my dad. And believe it or not, even if your dad didn't have the best qualities, you're still learning from them. I want you to think about that for a minute. You still learn things from your dad. Even if it's not the best quality, there's still a lesson there. So don't throw away your experiences that you have with your parent. It does not matter. The question becomes, what do you learn from it? And how can you pass on those lessons to your children? It's a generational thing. And being a daddy's girl, yes, I always see the brightest parts of my dad, but I acknowledge that he had struggles. He had had things that he needed to work through, but the willingness to do it, that's an important lesson as well, because it lets me know that he put something important before whatever was a crutch to him or for him. So I want you to think about that when you're writing in your journal and you're thinking about your dad and what lessons he may have brought into your life. Did he teach you to love? Did he teach you to fight for others? Did he teach you to fight for yourself? Did he teach you to learn how to listen as well as to talk? A conversation, yes, there's give and take. There's listening and giving feedback. All of that's important. And I got a lot of those lessons from my dad. Whether they be good or bad, my dad gave me lessons. And I want them to be lessons that I can share with my sons. I want them to be lessons I can share with my grandchildren. I mentioned many episodes ago that I have a lot of grandchildren. And I have a newer great grandchild as well. And if I'm blessed enough to be alive on this earth for many more years, I hope I get a chance to pass on some of the wisdom I've learned from my parents and from my own experiences. Because you see, like I said, it's a cycle. What lessons did your dad teach you? Can you look at your journal? Can you open the page for today and write down there what I learned from my dad? And just begin to write them down. And in the process of writing down what you learned, how did you put it into action? See, that's it too. When you're learning things, they become a big part of you when you put things into action. Now, sometimes the good things you put into action because you know it's positive and it's great and it's good. But then the harder lesson is when you learn something from those negatives and you learn to turn it around. And you say, you know what? This was a negative in my life. This is a negative thing that my dad gave me. But because I am strong, because I know that I deserve better, I can turn that around and see the opposite of what it should be. So Dad still taught me something. One thing I have to share, here's my favorite thing. My dad, for as long as I could remember, loved baseball. Guess what? So do I. There were times when my brothers and my sister would be outside playing, and if the Braves were on TV, Daddy was in front of the TV watching them play, and I would be in there watching with them. Now, here's the thing about that. I'm not athletic, except for running, but that's a story for another time. But I love watching baseball with my dad, and I never forget. We were watching baseball the night Hank Aaron hit 715. Daddy and I were hooping and hollering. I was a very young teenager, but we were hooping and hollering like we were there at the stadium with everybody else. The love of sport I got from my dad. And there's nothing better than those memories that I can think of than remembering those times together. And many years later, when Daddy got sick and the doctors did not give him very long to live, my brother and his wife brought Dad from New York to come and stay with them, and I did my part trying to help as well. I would go and relieve them on the weekends so that they could do things they needed to do, and I would be there to take care of my dad. And we fell back into the habit of watching baseball again. It brought back such fun memories watching baseball with my dad. I think about it now and I even smile. Your parents, sometimes I don't think even they recognize how much of an influence they have on your life. I think only now do I recognize how much of an influence that I have on my sons' lives. We'll talk about that some other time. But I just want to encourage you to look deep within. Please, look at your dad for the person that he is. Don't put them on a pedestal. Please don't do that. Because pedestals are high and you will fall. But we as human beings, it's our life lesson to continue to learn and grow. As long as we're breathing, we're learning and growing. So what lessons are you learning from your dad? What things do you get from them? What qualities about your dad are a part of you? Good or bad or indifferent? How do you utilize it? How will you use it? How will you let it help you mold yourself into best you that you can be? I have qualities from my mom. I have qualities from my dad. And then I have qualities that are a part of my own experiences. And I mold it all and mix it all in together. And it made me. I'm Joyous Janice. Today, I just wanted to tell you about my dad a little. Things that I loved about him. Things that I know he struggled with sometimes. And those are lessons that can't be bought. Those are memories that, regardless of how long he's been gone, they're still with me. And I can smile at the darndest things, including at the time when I was in my 20s, and I was so excited to see my dad that I ran and gave him a great big hug and sat in his lap. Yep, that's what I did. I said I was a daddy's girl, did I not? Well, anyway, here's this daddy's girl wanting to bid you a good day. Have fun in your journal, please. Think about your dad. Even think about the lack of a dad and how it is influencing who you are. Write it all down. Get it all out. Share it with them if you want, if they're still alive. Or don't. It's your choice. But the more you get to know those who made you, the more it'll help you along your journey to discovering who you are. Great talking to you guys. Have a great day.